It's fair to say that A Year in the Life is one of the more controversial and divisive seasons of Gilmore Girls. While I have a degree of affection for it, especially its first and last episode compared to, say, Series 6 and 7, which I'm not particularly fond of, it isn't a season that I revisit all that much. But for its 10th anniversary, I thought I'd look back and see what works and see what doesn't. If I were to sum up this season in a nutshell, it would be directionless, which to some extent feels like a deliberate theme, and to another extent feels like the show wasn't quite sure what they wanted to do with it, whether it was a definitive finale for the show after the divisive season 7, more of just a general look at how the characters are doing 10 years or so later, or whether it was a fully fledged reboot for multiple seasons. And as a result, some storylines feel more satisfying than others. I think with the three leads, Lorelai, Rory and Emily, they're all placed at a point in their life where they're not really sure where they want to go next. Rory peaking with her career, Lorelai and Luke being somewhat uncertain of where to take their relationship next, and Emily having to cope with the death of Richard. In my opinion, the strongest of the three is definitely Emily, as I feel like they were most prepared to give her a definitive conclusion, possibly because of the death of Edward Herman. Plus, in general, I think her having to come to terms with his death and re-examining her purpose in life, how initially she just assumed that her role was to attend to his needs, and now that he's gone she struggles to find something to do and is just catering to every little specific whim from his gravestone to his portrait, but ultimately starts to find her own identity. Lorelai's story is a little messier, but there are elements I appreciate. I do like that she is able to finally make peace with her parents and their difficult relationship, initially starting off with her and Emily falling out over her inability to think of one happy memory with Richard, but ultimately they managed to find that. When it comes to her and Luke, the fact that their plot regarding potentially having a baby just somewhat ends abruptly is one of those signs of the show not really sure where it's going, because I assumed it was just being put on ice and then picked up later in the season, but it just gets completely forgotten about. And while it's nice that they ultimately resolve their communication issues, I think the inciting incident to achieve that is a little contrived. Like, Lorelai being ashamed of her actually finding benefits to therapy and not wanting to tell Luke is a little weird, especially at this point in their relationship, and the fact that she potentially thinks that she'd be judged for appreciating it is a little sad. And the two of them lying to each other, it just feels quite childish. If this was directly after season 7, during their initial time getting back together, it might have worked because they were still somewhat on edge, but after 10 years I think they should have known a little better. But ultimately I do appreciate finally getting to see them get married, and the nice little touch of the music from their first dance being played. Rory's storyline is my least favourite, as I feel like it brings out a lot of her worst traits. The fact that she expects things to be just handed to her, and how she doesn't really respect a lot of the people around her, and kind of belittles characters like her boyfriend Paul, how she is continuing to have an affair with Logan, despite the fact that both of them are very much in relationships. I do appreciate Logan is somewhat matured in this season, and my personal headcanon is that his wife is having a similar situation, given that it's a marriage of circumstance, but still, I think it is a little immature of Rory. I think the whole quarter-life crisis element might have worked if she was a little more endearing, but her being somewhat expected that a bad job would just be handed to her with no work is a little eye-rolling, and her expecting Lorelai to be okay with her writing a book about their life. Now, to some extent, I can be somewhat forgiving of the less than satisfying conclusion to some of these stories, because there is a degree of realism to it, especially considering where Lorelai and Rory are in their lives. There's still plenty more to go, but that realism is not only quite bleak, especially in what essentially is an anniversary celebration, but it's also contradicted by more surreal stuff like the musical, or Rory hanging out with the Life and Death Brigade, which seems like a dream sequence at first, but then ultimately turns out to be real. A few additional elements which I'm mixed on is how the rest of the cast are used. I think characters like Logan, as I said before, and Michelle get pretty decent, satisfying character arcs. Some of the Stars Hollow residents are used pretty effectively as minor cameos. Some feel like they could have had more time. Of course, you've got Suki, but I can understand that since they were unsure about getting Melissa McCarthy back. Paris and Doyle ending up being split up and never getting that resolved does feel a bit unsatisfying and anticlimactic, which is a shame, especially since Paris has one of the funniest moments where she violently kicks a door in. But ultimately, I do appreciate seeing these characters again, especially someone like Jason, and getting to see that his life was sorted post his breakup and lawsuit with Richard. Ultimately, I do think this is a decent season, and I do think if they had a little more idea of what they wanted to do with it, it may have had a stronger legacy.